wants to kind of switch off for a minute and come back, I think it's fine. Just wanted to warn you. So we're going to watch this video, and then we're going to break up into breakout rooms afterwards to discuss why we think the perpetrator acted in the way that they did, because as Andy was saying before, we think a very useful starting point for preventing identity-based violence is understanding what kinds of things might lead a perpetrator to act in the way that they do, what might have influenced them. But we, at the same time, we also think it's super important to think about the victim's perspective, because the impact of a experience of hate, whether it's hate speech or a physical attack, it can be very harmful. So we think that voice is really important. So we're just going to quickly watch this video first before the discussion.
About in the 20th of January 2020, I took the overground. A tall and slim guy sit next to me, and when the train was approaching to Camden Station, I heard that the guy starting breathe in and expelling saliva in his mouth. And while the train stopped and the doors opened, he spot at the floor in front of me and rushed out of the door. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, you know, made loud noise and then spat on front of me. It's quite, you know, disgusting things. I was so shocked and angry, you know, so I feel scary and worried. When I use the overground, it's quite a lot of times, and then people saw me and then they will suddenly leave the seat. Everyone's worried about the virus, but I am the Chinese person, but I'm not the virus, you know. It takes the time to, you know, forget these horrible things. It's still a bit scary, you know, but after 30 hours, it's more release, yeah.
So this is an example of COVID-related hate, which we've been seeing here in the UK, where we're based quite a bit, but it's been happening all over the world as well. It's been happening in a lot of different places. In this particular example, it might not seem like a major act of violence. In our line of work, we talk sometimes about genocide and violent extremism. We'll be looking at different cases throughout today. But I think it's important to say that no matter how small, any act of hate can be incredibly hurtful and damaging for the victims. We do a lot of work with hate crime victims here in the UK, and any act of hate can be incredibly destructive. So what we want to spend a little bit of time thinking about is how these things happen, whether it is hate speech directed against Chinese people in this time of COVID, or other kinds of examples that you can think about that you've heard about in the news recently, or read about, or kind of know about in your line of work. And we're going to break into small groups using breakout rooms to think about this question. I think it's written on the next slide so that we can all see it before we grow into our different groups. And we're not going to have lots of time because we have lots to get through today. We wanted to spend about 5 minutes in small groups discussing why thinking about how somebody gets the point that they think it's okay to attack someone else because of an aspect of their identity. How might people learn this? We think that no one is ever born hating another person because of an aspect of their identity. It's something that's learned and something that's passed through generations. So what are the places that perpetrators might get this kind of information from to really think that another group is somehow a threat or something dangerous, and somehow think it's okay to attack that person? So we'll go into groups and we'll come back and feedback. I think facilitators can just take the headlines of the discussions and feed it back into our next bit of the discussion. So
yes. So who's in charge of breakouts? Anyone? I don't know who the host of the meeting is.
I'm sorry. I think that it's there should be tech support. Natalia already told us.
Natalia actually said that it would be Vitali now.
Yeah,
for this
Vitali. Mm-hmm.
I see, Vitali. Are you able to create breakout rooms for us?
If not, I'll do it. Ah, I cannot. Okay.
You cannot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
think the host is able to. All right. Well, we will roll with the tech. So yeah, as Delia says, right, one of the things we try and spend a lot of time thinking about is how do people get to the point where they think this is okay. I mean, just a few months ago, that the woman Feng who we saw in the video probably wouldn't have faced that kind of attack, and yet all of a sudden perpetrators now see her in a different light and think it's okay to do that sort of thing. But then this happens all the time and everywhere. And you know, we have Mark here who is from Rwanda, who 26 years ago had a genocide take place there where 1 million people were murdered by friends and neighbors and fellow countrymen because of an aspect of who they are. And so a question we ask a lot is, how do people get to that point where they think it's okay? No one's born thinking this way. Look, breakout rooms are here. So in breakout rooms, discuss what gets people there, and we'll come back and have a bit of a chat about it. Fantastic. That was good filling. Right. Everyone join your room. Right, everyone is coming back. We'll give everyone a few seconds. Some people click the come back button, some people wait for it to count down to 0. But I hope everyone had useful and interesting discussions. Right then, I think everyone is very nearly back. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you had interesting discussions in your various rooms on what we're talking about. We're going to try and go to a few of the different groups. We can't actually see who was in different rooms, so we'll be playing this by ear a little bit. But Delia, maybe we should start with our room, as we've already had someone lined up to share some thoughts from our room.
Yeah, we nominated someone to be our sharer. So thank you so much, Rachel. Would you like to kind of give us some feedback from our discussion, just kind of like the headlines, what we were talking about?
Yeah, so we were discussing, of course, the question, what makes people reach the point that they think that violence against another person is acceptable. We talked a lot about how a lot of the basis for it might be fear of the other, and the way that people are born into a society that can breed that fear of the other, whatever, be it racism, homophobia, transphobia, anything of the sort. And yeah, we kind of discussed how each generation might be moving towards a more understanding place, but really we're just watching to see what happens.
Thank you, Rachel, for feeding back what we were discussing. And absolutely, fear is a really big part of what can engender a lot of different things. Whether we talked a bit about propaganda as well, and fear mongering. So that was really interesting. It'd be fantastic to hear from another group as well. I'm looking at the facilitators. I don't know if one of you wants to speak for your group, or if you also had nominated someone to kind of feedback. Nino?
Yes, hi Delia and hi everyone. Actually, there was some kind of, I don't know whether technical mistake, because time has been shortened in our group. So we were just sharing our experiences from the different parts of the world where this identity-based violence is happening. So we come up with the idea of what is actually identity and why the violence is happening around this concept. And there was an inspiring quote from Celia Ben Habib, which is a political philosopher, and she claims that in multicultural, multi-ethnic societies, people used to set imaginary boundary lines between self and the others that could lead to the creation of negative stereotypes, which could be easily exploited and misused by political leaders or any other leaders. So this is what we came up from our group. What is identity, and why do we have this imaginary boundary line between us and the others?
Yeah. Can I jump in there? Because I think that's a really good point around what is the identity. And that's why, so when we define identity-based violence, we always talk about it as an identity in the eyes of a perpetrator. Because actually, like often these identities are just created. They're not even necessarily real, and they're not be the identity that the individual who's attacked actually identifies as themselves. But we're able to create as societies and as groups these kind of identities of an other, right? That we see in them so strongly, and you know, as we've talked about, to the point where it can be seen as acceptable to hurt someone because of that identity. So a really good point.
Yeah, and that came up in our group as well. We talked a lot about othering and about demarcations between us and them and kind of how that happens. And there's a lot to unpack there, which unfortunately we don't have much time to do, but it's such an important question. What is identity? And like Andy said, we see it in also very broad ways. We talk about all different kinds of identity groups. Sometimes in the UK we work on hate crime, but that's quite a narrow definition of identity. They look at 5 different categories. So identity-based violence really lets us look at identity in a very broad way. Maybe we can have feedback from one other group. Elena?
Yes, we had some technical issues, but I will repeat what we were speaking and chatting about. Actually, the main question we were discussing is how media, social environment, how social medias and any other things around us can manipulate our knowledge about what's going on, and how to avoid this separation, because when every day you're reading from somebody, or you're hearing from somebody that this is enemy and this enemy is trying to attack you, how to avoid believing this, how to check your knowledge, and how to check your own opinion about the situation. Actually, that was the main topic we had.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad everyone is, despite the technical difficulties, getting some time to talk. Social media is definitely a big one, and it's one that we talk about a lot as well. It's so easy to share information via social media without even knowing whether something is credible or not, and it can often really trigger emotions, just like we were talking about before, fear as well. So it's really it can be a factor. Andy, I think you wanted to jump into.
Only because I also wanted to add before we move on that is it Bebin has added something in the chat saying that they're having trouble with audio, but work it in government at local level in Northern Ireland, and says there's a lot of aspects that lead to identity-based violence here related to history and narratives which create fear of the other. Culture and cultural practice play into this significantly. And they've been doing a lot around tension monitoring and reporting, which I'm sure we'll get on to a bit later as well.
Great. Well, these are really, really interesting starting points for our discussion today, and we'll definitely be referencing back to a lot of the things that just came up in this discussion. You'll see why, because we're going to talk about the risk factors that we've identified. Jenny will cover.
Yeah, so really helpful to hear all those things, and I think you will see that a lot of those things that have kind of been brought up in that chat are listed here. This list is an inexhaustive, this is not all of the risk factors, but as an organization, we've come up with a list of society-wide and individual personal risk factors that can lead to an increased or decreased likelihood of identity-based violence. And I say this is nowhere near all of them. This is a redacted list because we didn't want the slide to have to be in like font 2. But these are drawn in from like academic and research from the area of like genocide and genocide prevention, from violent extremism prevention and terrorism prevention, from the prevention of hate crime and the building of community cohesion. So this is brought in from lots of different areas of academic study. And so we absolutely understand that when there is a national level political, economic or social crisis, chances of the risk of identity-based violence taking place goes up. This is the next one, something pretty much all of you said who fed back around that. The widespread perception of threat posed by a certain other, this othering, this feeling this other poses a threat. Normalization of hate speech, dehumanizing language, and incitement to violence against certain identity groups. We know when that becomes normal, when that's accepted, then there are going to be high problems. And again, like you guys kind of mentioned social media and things, right? So this is a space where this kind of hate speech has become more acceptable, more seen, less challenged. Widespread acceptance of disinformation, propaganda, fake news. I think propaganda was mentioned very specifically. But again, it's that kind of like believing of conspiracy theories about these other groups, this acceptance of disinformation. Widespread lack of trust in media and government. You can actually flip that the other way as well, because there's also something around unquestioning trust in media and government is also a risk factor. So if there's no trust in it, or if there's too much trust in it, there's a higher risk. Growth in the number and legitimacy of groups who use violence or the threat of violence, that seems obvious. Impunity for those who commit, incite or threaten violence. Impunity, that doesn't just mean not being tried by a justice system. It doesn't mean just the laws that govern these things. It's also about, like, in your community, whatever that community might be that online, or be that a geographic space, or be that your school or your sports club. Is this something that's challenged when you do it? If you act in these ways, are there going to be people that pick you up on it? If not, then there's no negative repercussions if you do threaten violence or use threatening language and things. And then there's a series of individual things that make an individual more likely to engage in identity-based violence. So not feeling valued, not feeling like there's a future, and that your opinions are important and that you are important. Not feeling represented by those who make decisions about your life, so that kind of sense that you can't change much. Again, not feeling in control of life decisions. And then there's some of those things we were talking about earlier as well. Feeling that this other group is responsible for the problems that you face, or poses a threat to your community's security. Believing certain groups are less legitimate or less human. And then we also know that a limited personal network, so not having many people around that can challenge some of those beliefs and views, again, is a risk factor. And so we look at these and think about these risk factors, and sometimes do some work to monitor them in different places to try and understand if risk is going up or down against certain groups. And we have this is very crude, but we can basically understand that these things can be getting better or worse in societies. And if you think just about those societal ones now rather than individual, some could be getting better, some could be getting worse. They're not all necessarily moving in the same direction in a society. But this is always moving, and nowhere's perfect. And these risk factors are going to in some way be present in every single place in the world. The question is, where are they? Are they low or are they high? Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? And it's always moving. We should always be working to reduce the risk and reduce the risk. Now then, I suspect that the polling isn't working. So what we're going to ask you all to do, because we were going to try and do a poll to see kind of what you thought about where you are based, and whether risks are going higher or lower there. But what I'd like you to do is just, like, if you're looking at this arrow, right, low down there, high up here, this is not a perfect science. It's just a bit of sort of thinking out loud, really. I just want you to imagine in your head, if you were thinking 10 years ago, where you live, where you are right now, or where you kind of know best, perhaps 10 years ago, thinking of just all of those society-wide conditions, trust in government and media, the belief in fake media, seeing others as a threat. What else was there? The normalization of hate speech, economic or social crisis. When you think of 10 years ago where you are, where would you put a cross on that? Was it quite low risk? Was everything kind of going quite well? Or was it high risk? So let's just have a think in your head. 10 years ago, roughly, where would you put the cross on that arrow? And then think today, where would you put it? Is it a higher risk today than it was 10 years ago, or is it a lower risk where you are? So have a think. And then if you click on the participant panel, I believe you should have, although I don't know if it's there, is it?
No, there's only a raised hand. Maybe we could have a couple people annotate, because I think that is a thing we can do.
So I would like you to raise your hand if today you think where you are there is higher risk. These things have got worse over the last 10 years? So can everyone, if you don't know, so in the participant box, if you click on participant, in there, there's a raise hand option. So loads of people so far saying that they think where they are today is worse than it was 10 years ago. I wonder if anyone would be willing to share any thoughts on that. I don't know, like perhaps, let's have a look. I can see, for example, Chris Garner, you've got your hand up to say things have got worse where you are over the last 10 years. I don't know if you'd be willing to come in and share just briefly where you are and why you think that.
Thank you, Andy. Yes, I do. I think it's to do with trusting government and what governments say. I think it's to do with the increase in fake news around the place. Maybe contributed a lot by social media and the incidence of particularly social media bullying of young people. So I think all of us are a bit at risk there. And maybe even in the COVID-19 situation, people sat at home a little more bored or a little more likely to attack you online than they might otherwise have been. And I think we're also normalising hate speech.
Mm. Where are you based?
Well, I now live in Portugal, but I'm based in the UK. Nice,
fab. And maybe one other person would be nice to hear from, perhaps Rachel Fraser. Oh, no, go on, Delia.
Well, Rachel, you can go too, but I saw that Joanna had, she put some things in the chat. She's from she's based in the Philippines, and she said before the risk was high, and now the risk is higher because of the prevalence of social media. I agree that there is normalization of hate speech.
Fantastic. Well, not fantastic, actually, very sad, but thank you for the input. And Rachel, I don't know if you want to come in.
Yeah, I was writing a comment anyway, but I think it's more complex, obviously, than just, yes, it's higher and yes, it's lower because of different factors. I mean, there's certain sections of hate speech and violence that are frowned upon now that weren't 50 years ago, and there's some that have been normalized. So I think, unfortunately, it's something that it's in constant flux.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and like these things are always moving, and you're absolutely right. Like, you know, actually, something like trust in government and media could be at an all-time low, whilst like normalization of hate speech doesn't exist at all. Like, it could be, these things don't have to be moving in the same direction, but we should be understanding that all of these things together add to risk or decrease risk. And if we're doing something to try and decrease these risk factors, then ultimately we're doing things to try and prevent identity-based violence. Delia and I were chatting when putting this together, and kind of put the UK about here. Like, look, we're not saying that like in the UK today we have super high risk of, you know, mass violence, but we do feel like things have got worse in the last 10 years. It feels like today we're in a worse place than we were 10 years ago. And, you know, just going through, you know, are we at a time of political or economic crisis? Yes, of course we are. Like this probably is feels like a moment of greatest crisis in a generation. You know, the UK economy due to shrink by huge amounts. Perceptions of threat. Well, yes, we're always seeing these things sort of about immigrants and various others in the UK saying, you know, headlines saying, sending the army to halt a migrant invasion. That idea that this other is a threat to us, it's an invasion, it's something that poses a danger to us and our families. And that's just one kind of headline. And this bears out in some polling that we did as an organization, asking, we didn't just ask about these groups, we asked about a huge number of different groups, including sort of charities, academics, and lots of others. So to want to be clear, we didn't just ask about these 4 groups when we were asking people, but we asked about to what extent people see various groups as a threat or benefit to the UK. Well, the Britain's success and prosperity was the exact wording. And we can see here, you know, I mean, Gypsy Roma traveller communities, 40% of the population see them as a threat to the UK's success and prosperity. That's a group that makes up less than 0.5% of the population. It's a tiny part of the population. It's almost impossible for them to pose a threat to UK success and prosperity, yet 40% of the population see them as that. So clearly there's widespread perceptions of threat about certain groups. Normalization of hate speech. Well, actually, since the start of COVID-19, there's been a 300% spike in anti-Chinese and anti-Semitic hate speech online, one report showed. Is there belief in fake news? Yes. You know, there's 11% of the population in the UK believe that vapor trails from planes are put there for like sinister purposes. So that's a huge, that's millions of people in the UK believing lots of different conspiracy theories. And so, you know, it is it feels like here things have been getting worse. And the question is like how we turn that around. Before moving on, I was just interested to hear perhaps from Mark and Rafał of where you would assess Poland and Rwanda to be on this scale, whether things have got better there or not. Mark, are you there?
I am, Andy. I'm here. I can hear you.
Would you say in the last 10 years, risk of identity-based violence in Rwanda has increased or decreased?
I can say it has decreased, and there are many factors to that. Mm-hmm. Just a few years after the genocide, you remember over 1.1 million people were killed during the genocide, and it was a time where people had. I don't think that's the question you asked me. I think the answer should have been, has it increased or not? And I think the answer is it has decreased. But also there are those spikes of fear that come like once in a while where people are scared. So for example, like next year, almost 12 million people who committed atrocities are going to finish their prison sentence and they're going to come back in the communities. And that brings a sense of fear, but also being that the country has been progressing over a period of time with a lot of teaching on unity and reconciliation and or people living together on hills, it has also shown that people can live together even after atrocities. So the risk has reduced, but we can't say it has we can't say it's not there. It's there, but it has reduced significantly.
Well, thank you, Mark. I sensed you would say it has reduced over the last 10 years. I thought that would be the answer. And I think Rwanda is a really good example of where there's been lots and lots of programs taking place. And Mark's going to talk about a couple of the things he's been doing in just a minute to reduce those risks over the last number of years. So I think Rwanda is a very good example of how you can, in a place where something really dreadful happened, where you know, a society was incredibly divided, but things can be done to reduce those risks over time. Rafał, I wonder what you would say about Poland.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to say I was very happy to hear what we just heard about Rwanda, because I think it's also very important for us to have some positive examples, and I think that is very crucial. Well, in the case of Poland, I would definitely put our cross closer to the right side, and I see a very big difference with the situation 10 years ago. And well, we all remember a decade ago, it was of course the difficult time of the global financial crisis that affected every country in one way or another, but actually Poland was rather lucky. It did not have a recession, as I think the only country in Europe around that time. But I think we suffered from the crisis in a more indirect way, and I think that the crisis manifests itself especially on the level of culture and the level of values. So I think we can really talk about a crisis of democratic culture and the crisis of democratic values in Poland today. And currently we are witnessing a very ugly electoral campaign where minorities have been targeted in a major way by a wave of propaganda, targeting the LGBT community, also talking about refugees and migrants, and also targeting Jews, which may be surprising in a Central European country in the 21st century, but it is actually a fact, and that worries me. So I would put our cross on the right side of the scale now.
Thank you for sharing that, and we're going to come to you in just a moment to hear some of the things you guys are doing to try and turn the tide on that, which I'm looking forward to hearing about. So yeah, as we've kind of tried to say, like, we think there's these risk factors and we think there's things that can be done about them. These are what we would call our actors of influence. Like, these are the 5 groups that we say can either do things to increase risk or decrease risk. And basically, like, these cover just everyone, right? So, like, of course, it's just a way of looking at it. So state government obviously has an ability to increase or decrease risk around most of these things. Civil society, by that we mean a really broad look at civil society. It's local voluntary groups, it's charities, it's businesses, it's universities and things like that. It's kind of all those that make up a society. Media is a really obvious one, and one we've talked a lot about. Judiciary and law enforcement, and how they act increases and decreases this risk. And of course, international community is really, really important as well. As I'm sure Mark could talk about in the case of Rwanda, you know, the international community played a huge part in both leading to what took place there, and then not doing things to try and prevent once it was already underway. What we want to focus on really over the kind of last bit of this workshop is thinking about, like, more of that civil society piece, because I think everyone here, I'm sure some people here are part of government, I'm sure some people here are part of media or judiciary and international community, but what we can all say is we're all here definitely part of civil society. And so we want to think about, like, what are those really concrete things that can be done? What sort of things work at a local level to reduce those risks, to reduce that risk of identity-based violence, to tackle some of those issues? How do we break down that fear of other? How do we stop people seeing hate speech as normal, or disinformation as normal? And so we're going to hear from Rafal and from Mark about some of the things they've worked on or are working on, and the kind of things that they've done to prevent identity-based violence where they're from. So I think, Mark, we'll start with you, shall we? Would you like to tell us some things that you've worked on, or things that you know to work in the Rwandan context?
Great. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to this vast group of amazing people. I think they have been quiet, but I think the intervention will be really up there. I don't know if I can share some of my screen.
Oh yeah, let me stop sharing mine.
Yes. So can you see it now?
Yeah.
Can you see something called peace and values?
Yep.
Great. So over the years, and most of the things we've talked about, talk about stereotypes, talk about prejudices, talk about fake news, talk about all these other things. These are things that are not going to go away. And that being said, it's very important for us that we equipped ourselves with the values that would guide us, but also to make sure that we work we work with different people, understanding them, developing our own skills, attitudes, so that we can make it and start making positive decisions and actions in our lives. So what we've been doing in Rwanda is similar to that. And the reason for that is in Rwanda, just like Andy said, we had foreign influence during the genocide. I'm sorry if there is any French person in this group. The French government was part of that, but also when they were teaching about propaganda, one of the things we kept on hearing over and over again was, I was told and I did it. And so often do we hear that it might not come in that way, that I was told and then I kill people, but it can come in ways of, well, this person is my role model on social media. So I did this, and then these people, this is what I heard from them and this is what I'm doing. So some of the values that we want people to have are really immense, and these are values that they're going to have. Think about critical thinking, think about empathy, think about your responsibility. How can you be innovative? Entrepreneurship, you might look at it and think, well, those are some of the things that people already do, but yes, these are part of curbing the identity-based violence. Talk about public speaking, advocacy, and this is what we teach young people. As a matter of fact, Andy, who is here, was a part of developing this a few years ago when he was here. Sharing, tolerance, cooperation, collaboration, charisma, character, leadership, inner peace, self-control, orderliness, resilience, and environment friendliness, courage, reconciliation, and unity, and all these things. These are all values that contribute. It doesn't come only one, but they are multifaceted values of things that we do. So we think about it in such a way that when someone is a critical thinker and they have empathy and they're responsible for their actions, then these can lead to trust. And then when there is trust, there is absence of fear. There is safety in the community, willingness to speak out one's mind, of course, without fear of consequences. And when that happens, even the deeply rooted things in people's hearts now start coming out, because they're empathetic, so they can listen to you. They're critical thinkers. When fake news comes in, when different things on social media come in, they look at it and they're like, this is right, this is not right. And then, of course, they're responsible for their actions. What else can you do for someone other than allowing them to be responsible? Because when they take responsibility for their actions, then they start going beyond the minimal things, but now they start understanding that the actions and the things that I do, remember in the video, the lady, someone gets out, spits on the ground, it crushes the victim, but they start understanding that their actions, it doesn't matter what these other people say, but my actions also can contribute to either easing the problem or making it more difficult. So critical thinking, empathy, and personal responsibility as the core values that bring all the other things together that will lead us to trust. Of course, living in a country where there was a genocide, one of the things that are destroyed is trust. And then when trust is broken, fear comes in. And that fear is what now will build on prejudices, will build on all these other things that will break the community and eventually lead to identity-based violence. Even people, something happening and they think, well, somebody has done it just because I'm so and so, instead of thinking, well, this is what I did and I'm wrong. So there is need for trust for people to live in harmony. Of course, we have, I told you about the values that we talk about, critical thinking, oops, I think I was supposed to do it like this. Yes, so we have a mix of different concepts that we talked about: social reconstruction, critical thinking, forgiveness, positive values, active bystandership. This is when it's believed that when someone is doing something wrong, and Andy talked about it, and there's no one to check it, people tend to think that it's right. So he talked about your team. It might be a football team. It might be your online community. It might be your physical community. When someone does something wrong and people don't check it, people feel like it's okay, then it gives them a boost to keep doing what they're doing. But if we have active bystanders or active upstanders, then when they check it, it starts, they start curbing it, because now there's someone to check it. And that's one of the things we're training here in Rwanda, be it in schools, be it in with young people, be it also with our politicians and decision makers. Of course, listening and sharing. One of the things that happens is after a genocide, one of the things that people do, they want to keep everything within because they trust no one. So creating an environment where people can listen, but also share, starts relieving the pain that is on people's hearts. And that is also something that contributes to this empathy. I talked about this. Trust and personal responsibility. I talked about this. And of course, this is taught to teachers and all these other things. So the purpose of what we do is to help people develop skills and attitudes that will have them making positive choices and actions that contribute to peace, relationship in a society. That's the main purpose of this. And when we talk about that, we talk about critical thinking, values, we talked about, remember the list that I talked about. That critical thinking, positive values takes us to choices and actions that lead to peace. So there are many values. Here, I put together just a list of few young people. I don't know if you can see my cursor, can you? No? Okay. Well, we can see different young people, and in the middle, or you can see a gentleman smiling. This young man is called Nsanza Maoroja. When he came to us, he was in his 20s, but now he's in his 30s. He used to be a child soldier, a rebel in the FDRL, which is a rebel group that fights against the Rwandan government, but based in Congo. And when he came back, his life was not a life where he had been indoctrinated with a lot of things, but we took him through the same training. Now he's a peace builder in the eastern province of Rwanda. You can talk about the gentleman on the left of your screen, I guess, who's holding a microphone. He's called Hamo. Hamo is one of those young people whom we trained, and after training him, he's been active in the community and working to bring together people. The other day, he brought together communities in Gasabo district to talk about forgiveness. And one of the things that he talks about, because he's also a genocide survivor, is how he was healed inside, which led him to also trust and also feel like he could impart this healing to go also to other genocide survivors. We can talk about the lady in blue in a fleece jacket below. She's from Gicumbi, Byumba, the northern part of Rwanda. And for her, that's where the war started from. And when they fled, most of her family was killed because they refused to kill Tutsis. Now, from that, she also has some pain in her life, but she has gone on to bring the community together to discuss these issues, also to create a platform where she can be heard and also listen to others so that together they can heal as a community. The lady on top in a white t-shirt is called Olga. Olga is from the National University of Rwanda, also bringing young people together to talk about peace and reconciliation. And these are the factors that go on to mitigate the identity-based violence, because now it's no longer something that the government is pushing, but now it's young people themselves taking up the mantle. And from 2013 to now, we have trained over 4,600 young people all across the country. And with these young people, they have started 326 projects, and some of those have an average of 30 young people in them. So together they have formed a network. I was looking for a picture of one of our members, and I think this will make Andy happy. One of the love to sees we wanted when we were starting this program was to have young people who will go on to even influence political positions. And Andy, I can say that we already have now a member of parliament as of the last election. And I think we had somewhere around 16 young people from our group who wanted also to go in political positions. And I'm glad that all of them were contesting for the same position. I couldn't vouch for anyone because they are all the youth that I trained, but we now have one of them in parliament. In summary, that's what we are doing, and that's the work we're doing here in Rwanda. Probably we can have questions later and see how we're doing it. Otherwise, thank you for the platform.
Thank you, Mark, and just so wonderful to hear everything that's been happening and you've been doing over the last number of years. And like 4,600 young people being trained is incredible. So yeah, fantastic to hear. Someone asked in the chat, Mark, if it'd be possible that your slides be shared afterwards.
Yeah, sure, yes. Yes.
And yeah, absolutely. What we'll do is we're going to hear from Wafal, and then I think instead of going into breakout rooms, because we'll only have like 15, 20 minutes left, I think we'll just have a chat and people can put their hands up in the participants box and either ask questions or share some thoughts around what they've been working on and what they've seen work, or maybe some of the things that have also been exchanged in the chat function itself. But Rafał, we'd love to come to you in Poland and hear a bit about the work of the Never Again Association there, and what you guys are doing to try and like reduce those risks, to try and prevent identity-based violence.
Thank you very much, Andy. And before I say anything else, I just wanted to invite everybody to have a look at our Facebook page under the title "Respect Diversity," which pretty much summarizes our message, and much more information about our daily activities can be found there. I hope you find it interesting. So I will just mention several points, and hopefully we will still have enough time for a broader discussion. So when we started as an organization in the mid-1990s, we didn't really think much about the meaning of the phrase "never again." We actually sort of instinctively adopted it. Of course, over the years we had more opportunities to think about what it actually means, what it means to us, and of course in the context of Poland, it relates to Polish history, especially the history of World War II, the Nazi occupation, and the Holocaust. But of course, the phrase "never again" can have a lot of different meanings in different other places. So when I went to Cambodia, I heard, oh, that's a good slogan we can also relate to, and same in Bosnia, same in many other countries. So I think the choice of the name reflects something that is important and specific to Poland, but also something that is quite universal. We started the group. First, it was an informal youth group in response to a wave of racist violence in Poland already back in the 90s. But at that time, few people realized the issue actually existed. Public opinion knew very little about it. So from the very beginning, our main goal, our main ambition was to break the silence and to collect information and publicize it and raise awareness of public opinion about the very existence of the issues such as violent extremism and hate crime in Poland, in contemporary Poland. And we have been doing it in different ways for many years, through publishing a magazine, publishing books, working with the media. I think today it is much more difficult for anybody to deny the existence of the problem, partly thanks to our work, I think. But of course the problem is still there, and it's as serious as ever. But I think especially now, during such difficult times, it is very important for us to continue with this kind of awareness raising activity. I could maybe just quickly mention one or two educational campaigns that we have conducted on a large scale over the years. One of them is called Music Against Racism, which consists of records, concerts, festivals. We are very much involved in the organization of an annual festival on the Polish-German border, which is known as the Polish Woodstock Festival. And every year It has about 500,000 participants, so it's really big, possibly the biggest free music festival in Europe. And we are very present there with the message of anti-racism and respect for diversity. A second campaign is called "Let's Kick Racism Out of the Stadiums," and that is in some ways more difficult because it's a more difficult environment that is often racist, that is often violent. And one of our biggest projects took place around the European Football Championships in Poland and Ukraine, when we used the power of football, the attraction of a big sport event to promote respect for diversity in both Poland, in Ukraine, across both these countries. And I should mention our latest activity, our latest publication of a report on an issue that you alluded to in the very beginning of our conversation, the coronavirus related hate speech and hate crime. That had a lot of publicity in Poland, because I think we touched upon something that is very topical and very important today. So we have seen a rise in both hate speech and some types of hate crime in Poland in relation to the pandemic. So, for example, for the very first time in Poland, we have seen a wave of hostility against people of Asian origin. That also includes some cases when my students were attacked or abused. I'm also a sociology teacher at a university in Warsaw. So we had accounts of such cases that we documented and published, and I think we inspired an important debate in Poland today on those issues. And to cut a long story short, in conclusion, I would just mention that Poland used to be a very diverse multicultural society for centuries, possibly the most diverse society in Europe. Today, it's the opposite. It is actually the least diverse society in Europe today, which poses a lot of challenges, and that actually makes it difficult for us to promote the vision of diversity as a value, which I think is crucial. So we actually always try to stress. We often try to stress the positive aspects of diversity in terms of Polish history and identity. And coming back to the issue of identity, we try to relate and refer to our own Polish history and identity as a positive point of reference, or a kind of resource, a cultural resource or a symbolic resource on which to build something positive. But of course, that's easier said than done. We are trying our best. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that and the work you're doing in Poland, and I know at particularly tough times as well. So lots of solidarity from us. We're going to jump through incredibly quickly because I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing our voices. Just a very quick list of the kind of things that people can be doing, which I think both Rafael and Mark have touched on lots of them already. But there's something about challenging prejudice and misinformed views constructively, not shouting you're racist at someone, but how do we do things that unpick people's prejudices? I think Rafael was talking a bit about that. Create opportunities for meaningful interactions between different groups, a really important one. How do you get people to actually get to know each other and break down that fear? Mark was talking about education, critical thinking, empathy, those really important things that people need to be able to not create this fear of other, etc., etc. Celebrating difference. So again, like the festival that Wafaa was talking about and things like that, these kind of things that we can do to just celebrate and enjoy that there are differences between us. Support marginalized people to play a part in decision making, people whose voices aren't often heard, like how do we amplify them? Help people build their personal networks, create opportunities for people to ask difficult questions and have difficult conversations. I think one of the things that we come across a lot in our work is that most people who have prejudiced views or dislike someone else because of an aspect of their identity, they feel they're not allowed to say it, they're not allowed to talk about it, they're gagged. But actually, if you let them have those conversations, it's a chance to unpick some of those prejudices, and they realize they were wrong. But if you never have the conversations, that never comes out. And yeah, I was saying a moment ago, support those who are marginalized to tell their stories. And there's a set of ways that we should do this, isn't there, Delia?
Yes, so I just wanted to talk about some of the principles about the work, because it's not just about what we do, but also how we do it. Both Annie and I come from a peace building background, so we know that it's, and I'm sure this resonates with lots of you who I know are peace builders as well, that it's really about the how, because if you don't have the kind of intentionality and purpose behind work, you can often have unintended consequences that might impede long-term efforts. So these are just some of the principles. Again, not an exhaustive list, but some things that I think are super important in any kind of work that we engage in. I think the first one is really a knowledge of the local context, really knowing the area in which we're working, and knowing all the different people and actors and factors that are happening there. We can't know everything to the T perhaps, but really being aware and being conscious that we're not excluding anyone, which brings me to the next point, which is inclusion, and really thinking about inclusion in a very meaningful way. No group is homogenous, no group is the same. Really thinking about vulnerable groups, those voices that might be marginalized. So when you're working with an organization, not just working with the leader of that organization, but thinking about what other groups might be involved, whose voices might get pushed aside. So not reinforcing any negative power structures. Fostering meaningful connections between different groups is something that Andy mentioned before. And I think this is just so important, because it's not about any kind of interaction. It's trying to think about what makes it meaningful between two different people, and what gets them to break down ideas of difference and foster a real sense of connection. Building on existing positive initiatives. So whenever we start something new, not thinking that an area is a vacuum, there's always something positive already happening, no matter how small, and finding ways to work in partnership rather than just coming in with our own ideas and plans. Accountability, this is really about responsiveness. So again, that knowledge of context, what are the needs in that particular group, in that particular area, and how can we respond to those needs and make sure that we're also transparent. And then sustainability or durability, really thinking in the long term, how is this going to sustain something in the long term? There's no quick fix for any of the issues that we've talked about today. They really take a lot of concerted and work and hard work and partnership. So those are just some of the principles in terms of the how, to get us to think about what we do and also how we do it.
Well, thank you, Delia. So that's kind of it from us. We were planning to go back into breakout rooms again now, but I think with 10 minutes to go, we won't do that. But really keen to hear thoughts or questions for kind of Mark and Wafaa, or just things that are happening where you are that are really interesting. There's still a couple of hands up, I think, from before rather than from now. So, but any new hands that go up, for any thoughts to be shared, we'd love to hear from you, really.
Yes, I have one.
Hold on, no, we're not going into breakout rooms. Vitaly.
Yeah, so we're not splitting up into groups, so just ignore the indication.
I'd rather, let's just do it here, because we've only got 10 minutes, and by the time we're in rooms and started talking, we won't have time to share. Louise, I can see your hand up in real life rather than in the participants thing.
Yeah, I just want to say there's a great quote from Mother Teresa, and she said, "Don't ever ask me to come to an anti-war rally. If you have a pro-peace rally, I will be there." And I think what we fail to do now is we always look at the anti-racism, anti-crime, anti-drugs, anti-everything, anti-hate speech. And what we focus on grows. So I think we need to really change our words to be positive, racial equality, and pro-inclusion, celebrating diversity, like you've said, and that positive focus will breed more of the positiveness. And I think we really need to change our marketing, you know, anti-cancer, anti-whatever, always focusing on what we don't want more of. And we need to really turn that around and focus on what we do want more of. And I think we will start seeing more of it.
Thank you. I think that's a really good point. And it looks like Norman agrees. So right, Louise, in the chat. I don't know. There's someone with the hand up. I don't know what the name is exactly. Anil?
Anil? Yes, hello. My name is Anne Elena. I'm from Paris, France. So I have a question for the speakers. I've been working on the issue of forgiveness and potentially analyzing the challenges that come with it, notably how it does place a certain emotional burden on victims. And I was wondering how, perhaps insights on how to deal with that.
Who'd like to go? Mark, you're unmuted, so you can go first.
Yeah, I like what you said. Forgiveness puts the burden on the victim, but also it relieves the pain of the victim. Desmond Tutu said that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and you expect the other person to die. Now, when I was a teenager, we organized the first campaign of forgiveness called Forgiveness: A Step to Reconciliation. And we started this in high schools in different parts of Rwanda. And I remember there was a big backlash about, the same exact thing. Why are you making us forgive them? Why should we even forgive them when they haven't asked for forgiveness? Don't you know what they did to us? If we forgive them, will that bring back our families? Because now this is a genocide. And when they kill people, they don't kill just one person. You'll find there is a wiped out family. You'll find even the one who survived has been, raped, or, they are immobile because of what has happened. Now, it's one thing to have physical pain and physical wounds, but the emotional wounds are much far reaching than the physical wounds. So forgiveness is what gives the survivor life again, because they're no longer bound. And forgiveness is like wearing handcuffs, and you put them on the perpetrator, and wherever you walk with them. I have many stories here in Rwanda where some of the people are saying, before we forgive, we would enter in a bus and would see almost everyone as the perpetrator who killed us. Now, forgiveness is a journey. My journey might be faster and will go farther, but your journey will take time. So forgiveness is not something that comes it's not a thing for everyone where people just jump in like in a bandwagon. No. Forgiveness is a step-by-step process that happens, and there are many other factors that influence that. I think we don't have much time to say that, but the truth is forgiveness is something that someone takes on their own, in their own time, and people will take it at different levels. And it's the same in Rwanda. Some people have forgiven, some people haven't. And some people might die even without forgiving, and all these are different levels that go on. But what I know for sure is that when someone forgives, they are no longer a victim of the perpetrator, and neither are they cuffed to the perpetrator anymore. They are free now to move on and be whoever they want to be, because they have released this person, and now they can start the inner healing. So it's a journey. It's not something that happens all of a sudden. And there are many, many factors that will contribute to that. So I don't know, probably you can have a chat some other time. We can also share experiences, what you learned, what we've learned, because I know we all have different experiences, and you can learn from my experience, and we can also learn from yours. I don't know if I kind of answered. I forgot her name.
You absolutely have. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Norman, I can see you putting things in the chat. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. It doesn't just need to be speakers.
Well, thanks a lot, Andy. It just all resonated with me, the whole rotation towards positive peace rather than anti-war. I grew up in the UK. I never went to an anti-nuclear, war type demo, but that was happening all the time, and it was always anti, never positive. There was never, well, what do we do? What's the positive solution? And I think it's just amazing what Mark has said. If people he knows who went through those experiences were able to forgive, that is just extraordinary. I was physically in January at the Ontario, California Peace Conference, and there was a presentation there that I'd recommend to all of you by a man whose son was killed by another man's son. He reached out and made a connection with that other man whose son got sent to jail, forever. And they founded a reconciliation movement. And then he advocated to get the other man's son released from jail because he recognized that he was acting under the impulse of drugs, whatever it was, and it wasn't his fault, as it were. An extraordinary story of forgiveness, but I think it's quite inspirational if you can find that somehow.
Thank you very much for that. That's really helpful. I think we're probably just about out of time now.
I think, Dan, you had your hand up. I don't know if you wanted to say something and for like a last comment.
Yeah, great.
Sure, it's more of a remark, not a question or anything. Concerning the situation in Thailand, I think right now is more, I try to do a prevention work because as you know, we have a lot of problems dealing with the youth issue in Thailand right now. All the young people, they basically, they don't want anything to do with the government at all. And they, as opposed to being just a movement to call for individual freedom of expression and everything, is just, I fear that in the future it will turn into against the old culture of Thailand, against the old way of doing things in Thailand. So I just would like to share this as a remark of how I try to do prevention work before the society go down to the root of like against people based on their political belief.
Thank you for that, Dan, and yeah, that sounds worrying, and I'm sure everyone would love to support in any way possible. So yeah, it's I think it feels tough in a lot of places at the minute, but obviously some more than others. Thank you everyone for joining today. I don't want us to run over, and a special thanks to Rafal and Mark for joining us, but actually to everyone, because it's been great chatting to people and hearing different thoughts. I guess like the sign off from us is we just think there's things that people can be doing everywhere all the time, no matter how small they are. There's things we can do that just help bring people together, or help challenge misconceptions, or just help someone feel like they're more valued in their community. And all of these little things we can do, if each one of us, if everyone was doing these little things, those risks of identity-based violence would reduce and reduce and reduce, and everyone's countries and societies would be much safer, kinder, more tolerant and loving places. So thanks so much for joining, everyone. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day, wonderful weekend, wonderful week and year and decade. And I hope I will come across and meet and chat to you all a lot more very soon. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.